many people have not seen it yet? Okay.
Interesting.
This will be mostly a discussion panel, so there will be probably pretty heavy spoilers.
Yeah, probably.
Probably full spoilers, because we're just going to be talking through a lot of stuff, but we can take this in any direction that you guys are interested in. There's a lot to talk about with Cyberpunk Edgerunners. I remember after I binged it in one night with a couple friends, and we just talked about it for a few hours afterwards, ad hoc, and we're kind of going to do the same thing here. If you all came out to a panel on Cyberpunk Edgerunners, let me first start out by what did you like about it? What made you want to come here?
What did you like about the show?
Yeah.
Music.
Yeah. Was there anything that made you really think about it more, or
the art?
The art?
What studio did this?
Studio Trigger. That's a whole
right.
thing.
I had a mind sync for a second.
Yeah.
I was like, there's a lot of pretty stuff being animated currently, including I'm getting my head confused with Batho because Chainsaw Man's in it. And I just watched season 2 of Demon Slayer, so I'm all over the place right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it is. Cyberpunk Edgerunners is a really good example of a good story being brought out of something that was traditionally not received very well. Now, I know Cyberpunk 2077 has its strong points and has its fans nowadays, especially now that what's it called? The game's gone through some patches. They fixed the major headaches of 2077, although I think it's still riddled with them.
Yeah. That's probably what brought most people to a lot of people will just run by it because it's on Netflix. I didn't play the game, but it turns out the franchise actually has a decades-long history across many mediums. It's originally made as a tabletop role-playing game, a traditional pen and paper tabletop role-playing game. And it's had a number of iterations. I think at the time it was Cyberpunk 2013 or something.
The weird world of 2013.
Yeah, because in the 80s that was 33 years in the future, and they're like, okay, what is the Cyberpunk going to look like then? It has there's a lot of 80s cyberpunk aesthetics to it, stuff that came out of the 80s. Focuses a lot on melding culture specifically with Japan, because in the 80s Japan was at its high point economically. And the concept of these powerful corporate conglomerations like the Zaibatsu and the salaryman ethos gets replicated in the megacorps of Cyberpunk.
I on a whim, I dipped my head into reading Neuromancer a while ago. Neuromancer is a very odd book. It's pretty hard to follow, but importantly, it did pretty much lay the groundwork for every cyberpunk that came after it. Amazing. If you read it now, you would feel like this is the most bog standard cyberpunk story I've ever read, and also extremely confusing. But it came up with all of those things. Obviously, it didn't come up with all that full cloth, but it laid the groundwork for the stereotypes of what you see in the cyberpunk genre nowadays. So worth reading for historical context, I guess.
Yeah, it's called cyberpunk because it's aiming to be a genre piece, and each iteration is going to make a slightly different extrapolation about what the future might look like based off where we are now. The property still has a bit of that 80s aesthetic in its core engagement with cyberpunk, but they kept making. They had the tabletop game, and they kept making. They made a few video games. It was Cyberpunk 2013, Cyberpunk. I feel like it was 2040, Cyberpunk Red, and then the game that most people are aware of because of 2077, because it had all the hype with Keanu Reeves and stuff. it was interesting discussing the different approach to the anime based off whether or not you had seen other properties. Because I had come into watching the anime with no experience of any other Cyberpunk the franchise property, not the genre. And I actually came in not expecting much, because they're, with a lot of genres as they kind of iterate, sometimes a genre can fall into a malaise and get a little stale. Like, I mean, we're on the millionth isekai, and sometimes they're just like, well, this time he has a cell phone. But this really invigorated my interest in the cyberpunk genre more than I had before, because I had experienced other things in the genre, but I think they were kind of more derivative and leaning on tropes rather than being as sincerely engaged with the thematic material of the genre. I don't know if you had a similar experience.
I guess yeah, I didn't even realize it was a franchise. How many of you realized it was a franchise? Okay, so a pretty significant amount.
Mm-hmm.
It's about half.
How many people have been playing since the tabletop game? Okay.
I'm an old
You're
man.
old.
Leave me alone. I mean, I played the tabletop game, but listen, in my day,
Yeah.
we would play tabletop games and take acid. It was a great time.
Well,
I mean, I think that's very cyberpunk, yeah.
I found out about it after Ghost in the Shell because I wanted to see
Oh.
what inspired it. And apparently Ghost Cyberpunk inspired it.
that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
And I'm sure, like, that is almost a surprising amount of people who know about the franchise, because, like, Netflix was really pushing this show, and it would not be surprising to me if it was just, like, a majority of people had seen it through just Netflix throwing it at their face.
Mm-hmm.
And all the press and the hype surrounding it. Like, even at this time, Annie Lowe is here, and she's voicing Lucy in the upcoming English dub. And, like, that was just a coincidence. We're doing 2 fan panels here. We're doing a Cyberpunk fan panel and an Evangelion fan panel. And guess who's here? The 2 English voice actors for 2 major characters within the series.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it seems like the new, like, big thing, at least for a little while. I don't know if they're going to follow up on this with some other story. I know that this was a work in progress between the game studio and a Trigger themselves to say, like,
Yep.
we want to make a story about David Ramirez because
Yep.
he is already associated as a legend in the game itself. There's
I
like
believe he has a drink at the Afterlife bar.
Yeah.
My friends who play the game tell me about this. They're like, ironically, it's a carbonated drink. It's just like vodka and seltzer.
Ironically?
He hates carbonated stuff.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
his one little quirk, is that he can't handle any of it.
Defining personality trait.
Yeah.
He hates suds.
It's
Also, like, in case it wasn't clear from earlier, this is a discussion panel, so if y'all want to say anything, feel free to raise your hands or whatever. We'll just go off the dome here as much as we can.
I actually thought it was really interesting that Trigger did this. This is one of the reasons I ended up liking it so much is I felt like it was that chocolate and peanut butter moment of 2 things that go really well together and elevate each other. Like, I've had this experience where, like, sometimes you have a writer who is doesn't have a lot of visuals, and you have a studio that, like, makes really great visuals, but, like, doesn't always pick the best works, and, like, you might put them together, and, like, Shaft and like, Monogatari was a really good fusion, like, where otherwise that material would be, like, unwatchable. And Trigger is, like, really well known, and they're really great at really getting people emotionally invested and creating these hype, bombastic moments. But, like, a lot of their works sometimes fall a little flat for me because the worlds can be a little thin. Like, I might watch a Promare or something else, and there's some big moving actors in the world, but not a lot of detail to the world they live in. Whereas being able to have Trigger follow the story of this character where all the hype and bombast is useful for an Edgerunner, but also having the incredibly detailed world, a setting that's been made over decades at this point, and also rendered in like an explorable world in a game, means that there's always things going on in the background that led depth to the world for me. Like you're just walking around, you'll see like an advertisement for real water or Meat Delight, or David will be having a conversation in the foreground while somebody's doing something really goofy with their cyberware in the background, and this is just how people live.
Yeah, it is like world building is not something I typically notice. I mean, obviously with Trigger stuff, it's much more noticeable with some of their properties. They are like shock and awe, almost like to a T. I mean, Gurren Lagann is all you need. Yes, it wasn't technically Trigger, but most of those people were triggered. Speaking of which, they have the rights for Gurren Lagann. But yeah.
Trigger also, Trigger also uses a lot of good color. And
Yeah.
Cyberpunk is all that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That it really like, especially in a cyberpunk setting where it could just as easily be misinterpreted as like being dull and gray because it's depressing and in the future and like close to apocalyptic. Some shows like misunderstand and like, oh, it's supposed to look like dreary and drab. It's like, no, it can be neon colors and really cool visuals and it still be very depressing.
Yeah. It's kind of the context of the world. Like Cyberpunk is like a dystopia. Yeah.
So, Cyberpunk has been going on for a very long time as a genre. I think I walked into it in the mid '90s. At the time, tabletop was a lot more prevalent at the time, and what ended up happening, what Steve Project Red and Trigger actually ended up doing is that this world has been being built from the fan base for decades. So you have all these little stories, Morgan Blackwell and Smasher, all these characters, they were original characters for various storylines that have been growing over the last decades.
Were these people's former player characters?
These are either former player characters, former bounty shots, former story hooks, what have you. Much like how Ravenloft is an ongoing thing within D&D, Night City has been a huge process within Cyberpunk, and Arasaka being the go-to bad guys or the main problem for everything. Everything's always Arasaka's fault. It's the way.
You could be in other cities in Cyberpunk, right? One with like.
It depended on your person's choices. Cyberpunk is already a very Night City and Cyberpunk are very very established. So like, it's kind of like the Dragonlance books and the Dragonlance world versus the original D&D world. Everyone liked being the Dragonlance world, but then you have the original 3.5 world. So it's one of those things. Yeah, everyone's flavor for Cyberpunk kind of depends upon your city.
Yeah.
Night City being one of the most popular ones.
Actually, let me jump to a thing. Just interesting things about how their world developed. It is this kind of weird apocalyptic thing, and in a lot of ways, it's just an extrapolation of like how might we misuse certain technologies, and what if capitalism happens? But like an interesting thing to me is somebody broke the internet, so these cities are incredibly interconnected within the city, but can't connect very well to anybody outside the city. I imagine for like a game like Cyberpunk that allows you to make each, like if you want to play instead in Chicago, like in Chicago or something, what was formerly Chicago, I assume, you could probably make whatever you want there.
Yeah, and the reason why you can do that is because the cities are self-contained, because if you go outside the city, you are dealing with the ether of AIs who will try to kill you. So you're now in an open network.
Vampire World of Darkness works pretty similar, where it's just travel between places is hard, so they're functionally separate settings.
Exactly.
That was an interesting part of like just jumping into the series without the context. Like Night City having all the established context and Adam Smasher being established. The only parts of the show that I felt were like weak-ish is that if you're coming in new, I don't have the context for why Night City is this horrible place beyond the characters in the story going through that and telling me that it's just a place where everything bad happens.
Yeah.
And Adam Smasher being this ultimate like god-slaying machine is alluded to once or twice, but then he just comes out and like dominates at the end, and I'm like, I mean, yeah, I guess I didn't know he was like still around. I don't know like what he's about, and so. Like, a little bit disappointing. In the grand scheme of things, it doesn't detract too much from the show.
I kind of ended up really, I kind of felt like he was really integral to the theme of the world, which is that really nobody it's a pretty hopeless setting. The best outcome was they got one person out. That was the best you could hope for. They're all living a very nihilistic life where, like, they're watching BDs about how to, like, go be a mass murderer, and that be your one moment of glory before they explode your head. And, like, that's good. I remember somebody was telling me about the game, and they're like, yeah, oh, you have, like, a choice between 3 endings. None of them are pleasant. Yeah.
I think the reason why you don't need to worry too much about Night City's past, at least for someone coming in new, is it should be seen more as a tabletop idea. Your characters matter more. Your characters' drives matter more than the background and the setting. The characters are the focus. The background is there for the flavor.
And I felt like I mean, I liked the world building, and I felt like I learned a lot.
Oh, it's a great world, but it's a world that's been established for decades.
Yeah.
It's kind of like bringing new players into a D&D campaign that's set in Ravnica.
Yeah.
Like there's all this lore from
So
Magic the Gathering about
Yeah.
Ravnica, but your character matters more. And what their place in society matters more.
Yeah.
And they'll get that lore just from being in it.
What
Even if
matters
it's
is-
bits and pieces here and there.
Are you a corpo? Are you an Edgerunner? Are you somebody who's sitting on the side of the street with the sex BDs and the jack off machines? That's a way to live your life.
I did find it interesting to subvert the main character idea a little bit here. With David, I mean, ultimately, for those who knew the backstory and you knew nothing good was going to happen to him. But for new people going into it, David's story is like, basically like, oh, he's special because he can resist the implants more. That would lead any shonen viewer or whoever to be like, oh, he's going to be the special one to save to take down the system, and then it just all comes crashing down around him, because that's what the whole thing is getting at. I mean, Cyberpunk itself, while it opens up a lot of ideas into the forefront of technology, like as a genre, it's usually not very optimistic. But yeah,
I would argue like that kind of gives the experience of Cyberpunk, which is Cyberpunk is a warning to new viewers. He has this thing. He has the shonen protagonist thing. Oh, he's gonna make things better. No, this is Cyberpunk. That's not gonna happen.
Hey, there's no way out. Yeah.
That reminds me of something else. For the people that have watched the show, Kiwi, who thought she was justified in her actions?
Which one is? Oh, that's the hacker one.
The Netrunner. One of the Netrunners that betrayed them near the end. Who thought she was totally justified in her actions?
Yeah, absolutely. You can't win unless you join the system.
Yes. Not so much joining the system. It's more like, I think she was totally justified, right? Who thinks that she wasn't justified? Who thinks that she was just betraying the team willy-nilly? Yeah?
Yeah, I mean, like, she just, well, the thing is, it would have been fine if she fully knew that the other guy wouldn't betray her. But obviously, he's like, she's leaving already, so why would she put her hand in the wrong basket.
Yeah.
She played her hand too soon. Is my
yeah. Like, I can see like saying that she's justified. It's just that she didn't play it right.
Yeah. It was kind of like, it made me think it was like, it's like, oh yeah, she's giving a ride across the river to a scorpion and then being surprised when she gets stung.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, it sounded like a good deal, but you can't trust this guy.
Yeah, like how in the first episode the doctor was saying, oh, everyone wants a deal as a corpo.
Yeah.
And as like in Kiryu's point of view, if the guy didn't betray her, they would have obviously had a one-way tracking to Arasaka. So in her mind, she was doing the best thing in her own interest.
It's just ironic because the thing that she says several times throughout the show is don't trust anybody. And
Yeah.
Yeah, there was that key moment when he's on the motorcycle. She says, "Transfer me my credits," and he says, "No, you're gonna see this job done all the way through." Like, if she wanted to go, she could have just gone then. She didn't have to end up like trying, but she wanted the money. Like, the corporate capitalistic greed. What a surprise. Yeah. There's other fun things to talk about with characters, especially like Rebecca herself, and like the alleged story of Trigger threatening to say like the lowly stays. And although that kicked off a very dumb Twitter discussion about the fact that Rebecca is technically not even that kind of category of character.
Yeah.
She's just a small woman.
Yeah.
Like,
If you were under 5'2", you're a bully.
Oh, okay.
I don't make the rules, man.
I just think them up and write them down.
I heard some intense arguments where they're like, listen, short women exist.
Do they though? Do they?
Yeah.
Are you sure those aren't children?
Fairly.
But I mean, it's also a cyberpunk world. At one point, she's like, I keep trying to get David interested. It's like, maybe I should just slot a different chassis and personality. Like, that's probably not, I'm not, like, we may not be confident that that's like what her original body looked like anyway. And like in Ghost in the Shell, like the Major's walking around in like the most generic chassis possible, just tricked out on the inside.
And later on, she swaps that weird younger girl model. You're like, that's weird.
Yeah. And like that's a thing that's so I guess let's open up that conversation about body modification. This boy doesn't like me. Maybe I should just have a different body and personality is an option.
The personality part is the interesting part. So the idea that you can change who you are as an individual by just swapping out computer chips.
Yeah.
Is something that has to be interesting. Because you have to take a bunch of ideas and change how you saw your history as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
I believe largely that someone is the culmination of their history and how they handled it. So I don't think you can change the history of a person, but I think you can change how they handle that history.
Is there a lot of like personality changes through the anime, like specifically intended through chips? Because like you had cyberpsychosis going through it. That wasn't. Nobody wanted to go through that. It just kind of happened.
Well, I mean, I guess let's open up that conversation because I've heard like in world and possibly and like from people who are interested in the franchise. There's a lot of discussion about what cyberpsychosis actually is, and there's disagreement.
The lore is, at least historically, the lore of cyberpsychosis is convoluted, confusing, and changes upon who you're talking to, what you're talking about, and how it happens.
Intentionally vague so that you can rewrite it as a game master, I guess.
It's literally that. It is your MacGuffin for if you need someone to do something that's out of character.
It was. I mean, that worked to Trigger's favor because they could just mold it to whatever they needed it to be for the story. Which, visually speaking, it was striking to have like them hallucinate a different thing and then totally lose control of their mind.
Well, there's a theming thing going on here. As you disconnect from who you are physically, you're also in parallel disconnecting from who you are, where you are mentally. These people are flashing back to, as we see kind of in their point of view. Maine is flashing back to a jog he has in the desert. Our protagonist, David, is flashing back to conversations with his mom and other things, and also having vivid hallucinations. But there's a theming of as you modify and have less of your original body in there, you also have potentially less mental connection to that body and reality, as that the sense, because they lose most of their sensory inputs as well. Getting cyber eyes seems to be one of the most common things. David has it before.
Yeah, nobody doesn't have it. It's like students comment it's weird that he didn't have any cyber eyes.
Yeah, actually, what's funny about it is that again, because it's been going on forever, the MacGuffin about it is at least with cyberpsychosis, is that that's not always the case, because even people with the least amount of cyber work can still experience cyberpsychosis.
Yeah.
Just because of intense emotional trauma, because of a poor malware infection. There are multiple ways of gaining cyberpsychosis. And while Edgerunners runs through the aspect of as you lose parts of your body, as you lose who you are physically, you lose who you are mentally, cyberpsychosis comes out in multiple ways. In the video game, there's one man who's clearly suffering from something in a mission. You're there to just pick up drugs that are supposed to go and help deal with cyberpsychosis. He goes, I took them off, they don't work. And then he's clearly not taking it. And depending on how you deal with it, he tends to take his own life. But again, he's clearly suffering from something, and because no one really knows how to handle it, people just suffer. Yeah. And it always ends poorly when it comes to cyberpsychosis. Both them and everyone around.
I've even heard somebody was telling me that there was some statement from the Cyberpunk author that, and it was just speculation, because it's not intended to be nailed down, but that some people can chip in a lot of body modifications, and some people get cyberpsychosis on the first one, and that it's kind of an interaction of the amount of body modification you're going to, but also how socially isolated you might be. And a lot of things in the real world are like that. If you're, I don't know, jamming some steroids or something, but you have like a good support network, you might be able to pull it off some of these damaging effects for longer.
That means, well, he also was a proponent of taking LSD.
Yeah.
So he probably saw what ended up happening is people who were alone and who would take LSD, they have a mental break.
Yeah.
While those are people in the community, what have you, take LSD, have a nice trip, and then call it a day.
And during the show, as David becomes more and more isolated from his crew, he gets more and more susceptible. Actually, there was even like in the hallucinations that you mentioned, there was like a little extra thing they threw in there where I was wondering whether or not if you pulled a piece of cyber tech from somebody who previously had that, you might have some of their memories, because when he put in his Sandevistan and he was flashing back, some of those flashbacks were flashbacks of the previous guy who owned it.
Again, that would be the malware argument. It's the ghost in the shell.
Yeah, there's a ghost in the shell. And I'm also like, conspiracy theories. It could just be that cyberpsychosis is not natural at all, and somebody just made a virus. Like it's like only Edgerunners ever go cyberpsycho. The Corpos don't have a lot of record of that happening. Adam's Basher is fine.
No, that's not true, because the first scene is a Corpo, like, I think, he looks like he's Miltech, but he's clearly that very augmented Corpo soldier who's gone cyberpsycho.
But Miltech also deals with most of the missions. They deal with high traumatic experiences.
Yeah.
So
PTSD there's a lot of kind of, with the context, there's a lot of overlap.
But I mean, most people think of Corpo, they think of the guy sitting in the executive office, typing away. It's not someone who's going to be at Miltech. Miltech also is known to grab people who are nomads, grab street kids. It does. Miltech takes you as long as you're good enough.
Well, the guy you're talking about in particular at the start was Lieutenant Colonel, so he was a Corpo through and through.
Okay.
Miltech, he was in it, and then it just snapped one day.
Yeah.
And then we got that. I was curious when you mentioned earlier about him taking the flashbacks from the previous guy. It's been a while since I've seen it, but is it possible that could have just been like flashbacks to the BD?
Yeah, because he was also watching the BD.
Yeah.
But like the perspective, it's hard to tell, because like, also if you're shipping BDs on the regular, that's got to be really mess with somebody's identity. Like you spend most of your life
Recording and experiencing.
Yeah, recording and experiencing somebody else's. That's gotta unmoor somebody.
So it's an interesting concept here, because all this talk about cyberpsychosis is like, so if you don't have anything, you're an outcast and you're weird and you probably won't survive because you don't have the necessary tech. But like even slotting one of them is like, oh, you start running the risk of ruining your entire life and getting killed and gunned down in the street. So it's like, again, it just ties into the grand scheme. There's like no winning.
Yeah. On the other hand, you could be a corpo, and you have an identity, but it's the identity they give you,
Yeah,
and they force on you.
That was the antagonist was like, there's no beating this corporation. The only thing to do is to become part of the corporation and get as high as you can. That is the only way to win in the city, because there's no winning. There's no taking down the corporation.
There's an extreme order and an extreme chaos, and nothing in between. You've got Edgerunners who are just monsters that are more entertaining, and you've got corpos who, I don't know, I suppose there's a question of like, some people disagree, like, are they even people?
Well, the scene that hammers it home is David comes in and he beats the shit out of the guy's kid, and he's watching it, and he's like, I don't care. And then specifically, the guy's like, actually, there's something interesting about this David big kid. Oh, and he makes that line, it's time for my child to learn what it means to serve the corporation. Like, that's his priority. There's no familial ties that come before that. There's no attachment there. There's the corporation and how I can advance and how my child needs that. Which is,
So how many of you are gonna? How many of you that have seen it are going to rewatch it? I guess when the English dub comes out.
It's out.
It's out.
It's out.
I don't know how that's so by them.
They censored the jack-off machine. That was the thing I noted. There's a guy in the street. Pillar's still got his jack-off the street, but I pointed it out in the street. The guy that's convulsing in the jack-off machine has somebody standing in front of him.
Oh.
It's really bizarre to try and rewatch something in a different language when you've already watched it.
Yeah.
But that's an interesting thing, like, just in general with anime, like, especially this one. It was available in Japanese first. It was fully available in Japanese. However, it was an American setting with characters with American-sounding names. Like, did anybody watch it in English first, like, on purpose, for that reason? No.
I wanted to sit through and see the original and get an idea as to, or I wanted to sit through and see the American version and see what we got, and then walk through and sit through Japanese versions. I find very often America changes small things, and I'll notice it while watching the Japanese thing, and it'll just bug me from the entire show.
So you reversed it?
So I went the opposite way. I went like, American one's out? Okay, great.
Why'd you all choose to watch the English version?
Well, I actually just watched it like last week, so.
So did I.
So I had like the English. So it had the English dub was available, and I watch things in sub and dub, and I just picked one randomly. But then usually the first episode I decide if I want to switch it or not, and I just like I really enjoyed the English dubbing of it, and so I
The voices were cool.
not necessarily that they had like English names was the reason that I needed to watch it, but I think like there's just when you're watching it in dub, it's a lot easier to be connected to the story for me personally. I still watch it. Certain shows I think are better in dub, and certain shows are better in dub.
Yeah, Dragon Ball Z is amazing in Spanish.
Yeah, as someone who usually watches like the Japanese dub, I think the multiculturalism of Night City comes off a lot better in the English dub. Like David's mom has a Spanish-ish accent, and like when the Tiger Claws first show up, they're speaking Japanese in the English dub, so that like comes off as very jarring and the craziness of the situation. David for some reason has no accent, but that's okay, I guess.
That happens after a generation.
Yeah. From American neutral.
There's also in the dub, I think there were like I think there were Edgerunners that weren't like the main characters when the car crash happened. Like they're in the dub, they're still speaking in Japanese, and so I think it's just showing like the cross culture stuff. Like they still kept it into the Japanese.
Yeah, that's what I've noticed about some shows. Like, I guess American shows like have that access a little bit easier to pull from like different languages. Where in like Japan, even when a Chinese character starts like speaking Chinese in an anime that's like done in Japan, it's very surprising because like wow, they actually went through the effort to get a native Chinese speaker. And because like we all know like the stories of like Japanese voice actors speaking English, and then somebody going, wow, he sounds so fluent It's like, no, it doesn't, but, I mean, I'm sure the US dubbing industry has that issue as well, but, you know, there is that pot because of the multiculturalism, that we can pull from, that is, like, probably a little bit easier to do here than in Japan. Wild guess.
Yeah, the English dubbing scene seems to have like an issue with like typecasting a lot. But from what I've heard a little bit of the English dub, it sounds like they did a really good job with the casting. Like Rebecca especially seems to really fit her voice. And then you get Gus Spring being the guy who's the antagonist guy.
Oh, okay.
I'm like, that
yeah,
sounds
that
like
makes
See,
sense.
that makes me want to watch the dub now. 'Cause I love
Exactly.
it.
Yeah, I gotta go back.
They also got Matt Mercer as the driver.
That's true.
Oh, yeah.
He still does voice acting. Oh yeah. Yeah, I looked up the cast a while ago because I was like, I didn't realize that Annie Lowe was going to be Lucy because I was like, wouldn't that be weird if we were doing a Cyberpunk panel here? It's like, oh, well, she is in there. What a surprise, like, what a shock. But yeah, it's like, I haven't been watching dubs as much lately, so it is interesting to hear the perspective because I watched them for a while when I was like in high school / college, and then I just leaned on watching subs, and very rarely I'll watch a dub. If it's especially like calling out. Like this one, I might have picked up the dub. I didn't even realize the dub was available to watch. I just turned on Netflix and it had sub on by default, I think. So I just started watching it with sub.
Actually, quick question: how many people watched it all in one sitting? Yeah. Okay, that's a lot more. And that's.
I don't have time for that.
Yeah. Because it did it in a lot of ways. Like I mean, I guess there was a time skip, but it felt cinematic. Like it felt good watching it all as one piece.
I found, because I don't have time to watch the entire show, was I watched until the fake ending, and then you watch till the next fake ending.
Yeah.
And then, you know, I have a theory that David's not in fact dead, he's just kind of captured in some way or form. Because you don't actually see him die.
Yeah.
You just see a red transition and go, I've had this happen twice already!
right.
Smasher 2.
I mean, he does. Adam Smasher pretty much says like, you should become a cyborg. Like,
Yeah.
He's like, nah.
But I don't believe that Arasaka would get rid of a perfectly good guinea pig. It's right there.
Yeah, they were
Majority
trying to
people.
get something out of him. That's why they had him on the loose.
He wasn't perfectly good by the time Adam Smasher was finished with him.
But he wasn't resisting either, was he? He's right there. And
I mean, the only thing that like disproves that is him having a drink in the afterlife.
that means very little, very little.
Yeah, that's why I said.
Because, well, he's dead, but like was the main Blackwell. No one found his body until 2077. So he had been missing for like 50 years, but he still had a drink when he got home, but no one really knew where he
He
was.
didn't have a drink.
Nice, dude.
And he didn't have a drink.
I'm pretty sure he had a drink, didn't he?
No, they
Drink lore.
it was specifically mentioned in the game, like.
Right. He did not have a drink, even though everyone's like, why doesn't he have this? Everyone knows about him.
Yeah.
But the drink doesn't mean as much as you would think, though. Because,
I mean, that's what's public information anyway.
yeah,
Right?
because.
I wonder, like, with all this popularity, because it became very popular, like, do they do a sequel, or not a direct sequel, but like a successor or something?
It definitely had an effect because I know a whole bunch of people who didn't complete the game, watched the Cyberpunk anime, and then went back and completed the game within a week because they were remotivated.
I ended up playing, I completed the game a long time ago, but I ended up replaying it after they started adding more, bug correction.
Yeah.
Like, I think I picked up the game after 1.5, and then they added the David Martinez drink in 1.6.
Yeah.
So that was added recently. Oh, there's another drink. What character am I thinking of? Whatever. It'll come to me later. I'll scream it out in the middle of us drinking beer.
One comment I got was that they really liked that Adam Smasher in the show is basically just death incarnate walking around.
Well,
Whereas like in the game they had like done some hack where they got their like pistol damage up to infinite and just one shot at everything.
People. I saw people in the final episode discussion saying like I'm going to go kill him again because of what he did to Rebecca. Like every other character, they're like, whatever. But Rebecca is over the line.
Yeah.
Well, it's because she's that boyhood or that childhood thing where you like someone but they don't like you back. And you're like, please.
Give her she didn't get anything. For as much as she gave, she didn't get shit.
Yeah.
And what did we learn?
We're trying to have a moment
smashed.
here. That was the last slide. We're trying to have a moment
I'm
here.
gonna throw an unpopular opinion out there. I think Rebecca's better in the sub or in the Japanese voice acting group than in the dub.
I didn't listen to the dub, so I don't know how unpopular that is.
I liked her in the dub, so.
They're pretty comparable. I like the English one a little more. That's just my personal feeling.
Oh, it's a famous voice actress. I just forget who it is.
It's the high emotion changes because she gets slightly deeper in the English one and then in the Japanese a little bit higher. So it's probably the cultural difference because in my head every single woman I know who's ever gotten angry at me calms down and I go, well, okay, all right, don't stab me, please.
It's a long history.
I'm Puerto Rican. I have a lot of cousins who are female.
If they do make a sequel, I think I'm really hoping that they do a different storyline and not continue Lucy's storyline or something like that.
She's on the moon. She's Whalers on the moon.
Yeah.
Well, she belongs there for being part of AUSA.
Yeah, well, it's a setting. Give us another character in a different, also in Night City, but living it from a different side. Maybe you follow somebody who was a corpo or something, and then it's going on a slightly different path.
Yeah, I mean, as long as there's a story.
Yeah,
like,
as long as there's a story.
It's an easy cash grab to stick something else in there, but like it'll suck. But
yeah.
As long as there's a good story, there's no reason to not.
Does anybody know anything about how this project came together? Just all we know is the apocryphal thing about they didn't want Rebecca.
I'm pretty sure
Project Red.
They reached out. They were like, "Can you help us make a story about David Ramirez?"
Yeah,
it was years of development.
Yeah, this was been in the works for a long time.
Okay. They were talking to Trigger before 2077 came out.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they were talking about this stuff, and I think Trigger sent them a final prototype. And that's where they went. We don't like this character design. And they're like, cut.
No cuts.
Yeah.
Like no cuts, all right.
Yeah, that is interesting to think about. Is if they have been talking about other storylines with Trigger too, because we do know that this one took years, but that doesn't mean there couldn't have been other storylines proposed or given. I mean, whether it be from 2077 itself or whether Trigger's like, hey, let's try and leverage other aspects of the board game or stories or whatever. I mean, I'm sure CD Projekt Red would help fund that, but there's more stuff in 2077 for sure.
Well, CD Projekt was talking about how they want to take the Cyberpunk franchise further. I think one way to do that would be to license out the name to animation studios who want to make a decent thing. Just do the Lucas thing of saying, I have final say on things, but have fun. It's kind of like the Star Wars extended universe idea.
Okay.
So we can get bought by Disney in 50 years and thrown out the window.
Oh, give me five.
Disney announces plan. Rebecca becomes a Disney princess.
She already has those mouse ears. It works out fine.
Yeah. He did point out something that I didn't consider earlier, is that Lucy is older than David, and David is not 18.
No.
I mean,
the laws changed by then.
What?
The laws changed by then.
Well, yeah, but
How
have
old
morals.
is? Do we have any confirmation how old Lucy is?
Lucy's in her 20s.
Okay.
Mid-20s.
In the anime, they don't really say. Like, I remember David asked her, oh, I'm just surprised that you seem so young. They don't actually say in the anime.
I think there was like a Reddit thread, and one of the people that worked on the show, I think, said that she was in her 20s, like early 20s. Same thing with Rebecca. They said they were both around 20s.
No, Rebecca, why? Why are you a dirty old woman?
I mean, that was one of the things that kind of I enjoyed in the early parts, was it really felt like a pretty noir femme fatale opening, which like Cyberpunk's just really firing on all cylinders in all the things that the genre can do. Whereas I've seen a lot of stuff where it's just we put some neon and some big guns and we called it Cyberpunk genre.
no one looks like David Bowie though is really cyberpunk.
Yeah.
Does anyone know about the music production? If the music was made before if the music and the game were completed before the anime, like a lot of those tracks really feel like a lot of virtual beats and scenes, and I'm wondering if the tracks were written for the anime and then put into the game.
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, it was reversed, I think. I think it was
So
the
what
game.
ended up happening is they bought the rights for the entire. I think Project CD Projekt probably went, hey, we're going to use these. Here's our list of songs for our music stations. Would you like to have anything to go and check out? They probably still having the licensing for it. When we can use it for this as well.
Yeah, it was probably a better idea to do that too. It like helps.
It's also money saving and capitalist.
Yeah, but like it also
Oh, no.
like it also lends itself to like helping them tie together. Also, like the songs being in English also help world build there a little bit too.
Yeah, what I liked was like in main step theme, I learned that it was the last half of a certain song in the radio that had all the death metal.
I mean,
little bits of flavor that really add to the franchise.
I mean, with the amount of like instrumentation and the production of some of those songs, you can definitely tell that it's like made for something that isn't typically anime, because a lot of anime soundtracks
Are bangers.
small. Yeah, but they're bangers, but like a lot of them are smaller crews, different instrumentation, that kind of thing, where there was a lot more like production in a lot of these songs.
Yeah, well, also keeping the songs close to what Night City is experiencing, which is supposed to be a big production thing. Even the flashback scenes with Johnny Silverhand, even them being on a small stage, it's a huge production value for the sounds that are coming out of those speakers.
Speaking of like music and stuff, like the opening, I didn't recognize it at first, but one of my friends is a really big fan of the artist who made the opening, and he's like an American artist that has nothing to do with anime. So I wonder like how they like came across that song. Because I was watching it in our living room. She like came out. She was like, "What? This is like on my playlist." Like she doesn't watch anime.
It was like Franz Ferdinand or
Yeah,
something.
The song's like 15 years old.
I mean, I like the song, but I was really I wonder how they like decided that.
I mean, with anime studios specifically, a lot of it's probably like somebody on the staff was a fan. The artist is not as relevant anymore, and it's probably much cheaper to license than something much bigger. That's like, especially with something like talking about English songs, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. I mean, Roundabout was basically popularized with millennial and Zoomer generations because of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Even though Yes is by no means a small band, Roundabout was one of their not as popular songs as some of their other tracks. And obviously, none of the other songs JoJo's picked up ever got to the same level as Roundabout, but they continued that trend of like, here are some like lesser known, like yes, we know you would love a song for Ronnie James Dio or Part 3, but instead you have Walk Like an Egyptian because it's somebody probably liked it on staff, they knew about it, and they're like, it's much cheaper to license than Dio's music. So cost is definitely a thing.
And I remember there was also Radiohead with what was Real Nair.
What? What are you talking about?
Another anime that had Radiohead.
So one that doesn't have
Proxy.
Yeah, I
They
mean,
used Radiohead a lot.
Yeah, like, and even like that, it just sometimes it might just be artists taking a risk on a project. Like Serial Experiments Lane had a no wait, not Lane. Gunslinger Girl had Boa Duvet, and that like every comment on that.
That was
Am I having a stroke?
It's Delgados.
Yeah.
I mean, I've
Yeah.
got really into their music after watching that.
So the Delgados, if you go to their YouTube channel now, you'll just see a bunch of comments saying Gunslinger Girl brought me here.
Yeah.
And so sometimes it's like the Delgados are not super popular. Maybe they're sort of popular, and like Boa was not popular, but because of Lane, they at least have something, and because of Gunslinger Girl, the Delgados have something that they're like known for now. So sometimes it's like, hey, you want to take a risk on this anime? It might succeed. You might one song might be super popular and it might lead people to look at other stuff.
But also just be a paycheck, it just kind of worked out that way.
Yeah.
Or sometimes you'll forever be haunted by the specter of a giant green ogre.
Yeah, that's true.
That's just a random side effect.
So it's on the playlist in the video game room.
Why?
Yeah, no, they have that guy has a lot of good songs. I don't think he had any. It'd be cool if he had the Cyberpunk stuff, but I don't think he does. I think we're getting to last 10 minutes here.
Yeah.
Does anybody have anything else they want to talk about with the show? What they liked? What they want to see more of? Just gush over one of the characters.
Rebecca.
Yeah.
I really want to stay at your house. It's such a
Yeah, my bad.
Yeah.
Is there gonna be another season for it, or is it
We were talking
We
about
were talking about possibilities, and again, CD Projekt Red has stated they want to make Cyberpunk into a full-on franchise, much like they did with Witcher. So they want to expand upon it, so they are looking at making more projects for Cyberpunk digitally. So they might also be working. Again, the thing I said was the smart thing, the money thing to do would be to license out the ideas to other artists, other authors, what have you, and to let them build and just have final say on things. That's how we ended up with the Star Wars Extended Universe before Disney killed it. We had lots of really good works made that just Lucas went, yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
So yeah, the hope is that they will. I mean, it's money on the table right now. At least
Free money.
At least as long as they keep making quality. Like
I don't know, dude. The game when it first came out was not quality.
No, I'm talking about like after Edgerunners. If they make another anime property and it's like bad, then all of a sudden it's like dried up. But like if they that's the thing, and we were talking about like Edgerunners had the established canon. They had a character to go off of. They didn't have the backstory like completely done, but they were like, we have a goal in mind, we know what to build towards, and we have a set amount of time to do that. Now, are they going to do that again for a different character, or are they going to go in a completely different direction?
Well, I mean, David wasn't.
did he actually die?
No. Possibly. Maybe. My theory is he didn't die. But David's story, while it can be finished, they can just add more people. As I said, the Cyberpunk universe starting as a tabletop, a lot of these big names you hear now, they were just large, well-developed characters from the original. Forever ago, when we used to have fanzines and gaming conventions where we would sit down and like, here, right here, read my character's OC. And like, oh,
yeah.
great, cool. I'm glad you're pretty.
Yeah.
The problem is that
Okay, Grandpa, let's get you the
triggered.
We would use twice I died. I had acids, and there were bitches everywhere.
Go ahead.
I don't think I can't remember too many shows that Trigger has done a season 2 for.
Yeah.
This is also a special case. Like, this was not Trigger doing Trigger stuff. This was Trigger doing somebody else's stuff. In a very Trigger way.
Do you think anybody else could do this except for Trigger?
Yes.
Yeah.
You UFO game was probably.
I know. And a change company.
Yeah, like I think if CD Projekt Red really wants to like put their hands in many baskets, they're just like, hey, UFO UFO-able? Yeah.
UFO table.
Yeah, UFO-able.
I'm UFO.
They can reach out to them. They can reach out to Mappa. They can reach out to like probably like A1.
The fear is that they're going to cheap out on season 2 because they're like, oh yeah, we didn't have such success. Let's cheap out and get JC Studios to do season 2 or something like that.
Yeah, just do a psychopath.
Yeah.
Well, that's a different writer.
Yeah,
that was the problem.
Get Toei Animation's like Z Team to do season 2.
But then everyone will look like David Bowie. Everything will be right again.
Yeah, okay.
If you guys ever watched Cyber City, where every character is just David Bowie, including females.
Yeah, but I think it's a good like Cyberpunk in general. Like to summarize, pretty much just a good step into Cyberpunk as a genre. And I mean, seek out stuff you like from Cyberpunk, and you know, there's a lot to pick from. There's like 50 years worth of history of Cyberpunk stuff. Not just Cyberpunk tabletop stuff, but like Cyberpunk as a genre itself.
I think you can start branching out into desert punk or solar punk or any other punk that there is.
Not steampunk though. Nobody wants to do that.
Never steampunk.
It's a dead genre.
It's aesthetic.
Yeah. Moving gears on your pants about, as I said, aesthetic, you were just bored.
Alright, I think we'll call it there to give the next panelists some time to set up. Thank you all for coming out.
Yeah.
I hope you enjoyed the panel. We've got like 5